Hollywood has long been portrayed as a world of dazzling lights, legendary figures, and perfectly staged illusions. Viewers are shown elegance, chemistry, and performances that feel immortal. But what happens when the truth behind the lens clashes with the story presented on screen? For Sally Field, widely regarded as one of the finest actresses of her era, reality was anything but magical. Her journey through the industry involved far more than demanding roles and creative challenges. Along the way, she faced co-stars whose behavior eroded her confidence, tested her self-respect, and transformed collaboration into conflict. These were not fleeting disagreements or minor tensions. They were encounters with individuals whose influence left lasting scars, both professionally and emotionally. Once the full extent of what she endured comes to light, it becomes difficult to view certain Hollywood legends the same way again. Burt Reynolds, the charismatic charmer, stands at the center of one such story. Some Hollywood romances appear flawless from the outside, only to unravel once the curtain is lifted. For years, one particular relationship dominated headlines and magazine covers, celebrated as a love affair audiences passionately supported. Yet beneath the laughter, charm, and public affection, another reality existed, one that left Sally Field emotionally worn and deeply diminished. Their bond sparked during casting for Smokey and the Bandit. On screen, their connection crackled with energy, delighting audiences with playful exchanges and natural attraction. Away from the cameras, however, the dynamic began to change. What started as thrilling romance gradually evolved into something far more restrictive. In interviews and later in her memoir and pieces, Sally revealed that gestures resembling care often concealed efforts to control and silence her. At the peak of their relationship, she was an emerging star with strong ambitions and a growing sense of self, yet she frequently felt overshadowed in his presence. While the public viewed them as equals, she endured ongoing emotional erosion. Conversations were interrupted, decisions questioned, and confidence slowly chipped away through subtle remarks. In public, compliments were wrapped in charm but carried an undercurrent that stung in private. Sally later explained that her sense of voice slowly faded. She no longer felt whole, more like a background figure in someone else's spotlight. Even intimate conversations were guided by his perspective, leaving little room for her own expression. She recalled that he preferred her agreeable and silent rather than independent or outspoken. The constant emotional push and pull became draining. Periods of affection were followed by cold distance, creating confusion that affected her both personally and professionally. At times, the pain wasn't simply neglect, but the sensation of being intentionally minimized. Looking back, she admitted she never truly felt seen, present but incomplete. Despite the emotional toll, she continued trying to make the relationship work, investing her energy in understanding him, hoping love would smooth the sharp edges. Instead, the more she gave, the more she lost herself. What began as love turned into endurance, survival within an unstable emotional atmosphere. The impact stretched beyond the relationship itself, affecting her confidence, creativity, and sense of identity. Although she never publicly attacked him, her later reflections reveal a woman who carried the weight of emotional turmoil quietly for years. When she finally left, it was not fueled by anger but by clarity, recognizing that love should never feel like pain. Her memories of that time are not filled with bitterness, but with the insight of someone who survived being dimmed by another's fame. What the world romanticized as an iconic love story, she remembers as a lesson in emotional limits. On screen, he was the lovable rogue, but in her life, he represented disguised heartbreak, someone who could illuminate a film while casting shadows on a soul. Decades later, it remains clear that this chapter left some of the deepest wounds she ever carried. Shirley MacLaine, the scene commander, represents another difficult chapter. A film intended to celebrate strength, friendship, and compassion became something far more turbulent behind the scenes. For Sally Field, one of her most emotionally demanding performances unfolded under the strain of a co-star whose dominance disrupted not only the narrative, but the spirit of the set itself. During the making of Steel Magnolias, Sally took on the role of MLANN, a mother navigating love and devastating grief. The part required openness and emotional exposure, qualities she delivered wholeheartedly. Yet she soon sensed an unspoken struggle for attention. Shirley MacLaine brought a sharply contrasting energy to the production. While audiences later enjoyed her bold humor, those on set observed behavior that created tension almost immediately. Collaboration gave way to competition, grace to interruption, and the director's guidance was often overridden. Sally later described the environment as emotionally exhausting. Shirley's need for control extended beyond her performance into rehearsals, staging, and scene dynamics. She frequently inserted herself into moments not centered on her character, altering timing and tone in ways that conflicted with Sally's emotional buildup. For an actor working to portray authentic grief, these intrusions were deeply destabilizing. One moment remained particularly painful years later. A critical monologue requiring raw emotion had to be filmed 17 times, not due to Sally's performance, but because sarcastic remarks repeatedly shattered the mood. Each attempt became more difficult as she struggled to maintain genuine emotion while focus was deliberately diverted. Still, Sally maintained professionalism, remaining composed, respectful, and generous on screen. Privately, however, the strain was undeniable. In later conversations, she avoided direct criticism but referred to certain performers as bringing chaos by choice rather than necessity. The clash was not merely stylistic, but philosophical. Sally sought quiet emotional truth, while Shirley appeared driven by attention and dominance. This contrast turned daily filming into a battle between storytelling and spotlight control. Even after production ended, the emotional residue lingered. Audiences only saw the final, moving performance, unaware of the effort required to protect its sincerity. Behind the scenes, it was not harmony, but endurance that carried the film forward. Although Steel Magnolias became a beloved classic, Sally viewed the experience as proof that vulnerability struggles to survive under constant pressure. She arrived to tell a story of healing, only to learn how fragile emotional honesty can be when every moment becomes a competition. Tommy Lee Jones, known as the Ice Wall, presented a different challenge entirely. Sometimes the most difficult role is not scripted, but lived in the silence between scenes. What should have been an opportunity for meaningful artistic partnership became one of the most isolating periods of Sally Field's career. On paper, the project promised depth, intensity, and emotional complexity. In reality, it left her feeling disconnected and emotionally numb. The film Backroads offered a gritty narrative filled with emotional layers. Sally began filming with optimism, imagining a shared exploration between two broken souls finding connection. That hope faded quickly. From the outset, her co-star maintained a rigid emotional distance. Rather than openness or curiosity, she encountered an unyielding detachment. While professionalism ensures lines are delivered and marks are hit, Sally believed true performance required trust and shared vulnerability. Instead, she faced a mechanical approach devoid of warmth. Tommy arrived, performed when necessary, and withdrew without engagement. There were no conversations, no shared energy, no rapport. For Sally, this emotional void was deeply unsettling. She depended on connection, subtle cues, and mutual presence to shape scenes. Acting opposite him felt like speaking into emptiness. Attempts at casual conversation or character discussion were brushed aside with silence or brief replies. The experience felt less like collaboration and more like enduring emotional coldness. That disconnect ultimately seeped into the film itself. Critics later noted a lack of spark between the leads, sensing an absence they couldn't define. What audiences felt instinctively was the same emptiness Sally lived through on set.